So, man, how's it been going this week? Other than feeling sick
Busy.
today, I know. I
Busy,
know. I
busy.
feel like we should just hop on here and have like an hour long,
Yeah. How about
therapy
we don't
session.
cover any of the topics and y'all just want to chat? People that are in
Yeah,
attendees and stuff. Let's just
yeah,
chat. Let's just BS a little bit.
yeah. Just talk about how your week's going. We can commiserate together, and
I mean, I'm just going to talk about how many people I've interviewed this week. So, yeah. Oh,
um,
man. Put out a
any,
YouTube video this week, stuff like that.
is it
But
live?
yeah, I think I put it live Monday or
Oh, you may
Tuesday.
want you may
Tuesday, I
want to tell
think.
our friends here about it then.
Nah,
No, okay.
nah, I don't care.
This may
No.
be a low energy show, folks. We're both we're both real tired.
Oh man. We R&D here at FRSecure. We're trying to start up a YouTube series. Kind of just like it's gonna start off very red team focused. The very first video is just like how to get into pen testing, how to get started in that, what you should be learning, how you should go about applying for jobs, resume stuff, like just little tidbits that we can fit into 30 minutes. But our plan is to kind of do some educational stuff around pen testing and stuff, and then eventually bring in other people to talk about incident response stuff, consulting stuff, things like that. But it's yeah, first video finally posted. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm excited.
ambushy to you on YouTube if y'all want to find it. But yeah.
Now, are you guys like testing like hog pens and goat pens, or what kind of pens are you testing here?
Yeah, no, ink pens,
Oh, okay.
fountain pens, yeah. Really like just old calligraphy pens, like the dip in the inkwell,
Oh,
ones.
yeah,
Big fan of
fancy.
those. I used to do calligraphy a lot. I took it in high school as like one of my art classes for like multiple years. And I had probably I don't even know, probably a couple hundred nibs like that you put on the pens to,
Yeah,
for the dipping and stuff. I mean, I was really into it for a long time. I am not anymore. I couldn't tell you. I think I threw them all away. I just moved on. I was like, I don't got time to write anymore. I got keyboards, like I don't know. This was in high school. That was like 500 years ago. So
I definitely type a lot faster than I write, and I've always written like a serial killer. Just to be honest with you, if you looked at my stuff, you'd be like, "There's something wrong with this guy." Um, and so keyboards are really handy to have. Um, and so over the last few years, just like going to conferences and stuff where you don't want to drag out a laptop or something like that, but maybe you have a little notepad to take some notes. I'll catch myself getting to like the end of a sentence and I'm literally just scribbling. Like I'm not even making letters
yeah,
anymore. It's just terrible. Yeah.
handwriting
So
analysis podcast. Yeah,
yeah,
no.
it's slanted to the left and very hard on the paper. So make out of that what you will.
Oh, thank you, Chris, for posting that link. I appreciate you
Yeah.
compensating for my low energy. You're the best. um, yeah, I mean, one more thing on this before we move on. We really should actually do something useful
Probably,
here.
yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny. I used to really like take writing seriously. It was an art form, like I said, and I really enjoyed it and doing like graphic design stuff with it and all kinds of stuff. I really did. And then you just don't, like, your life gets busy. You go on with other things, do your career and stuff like that. It's like so funny that I went from that to now. If you ask me to like write down notes and we like sat down for 10 minutes talking and I was writing down notes, my hand will be cramping so badly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can't
Yeah.
write for 10 minutes straight without just like my hand like wanting to die now. Um, that's just ridiculous. I'm sure a lot of other people have experienced that too.
Sure.
If it's 2023 and you're able to write for more than 10 minutes without your hand cramping, good for you.
Yeah. I mean,
Fantastic stuff.
definitely.
Especially if
Yeah.
you're in security. you know.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
man. All right, talking about security, things to
Nah.
talk about. We got a Microsoft 0 day, right? Windows 0 day that was actively exploited. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. So we threw a post up on our Hyphy blog this week because oddly enough, we've not had a lot of news lately on new vulnerabilities and that kind of thing. So this one came about 0 day, actively exploited in the wild. Um, in particular, being used by the group handling the Nokiyawa ransomware. It's the best I can do on the pronunciation there.
Sounded
Have
right.
not, yeah, have not worked any of those ransomware cases. Was completely unaware of that variant actually until this article. So don't have a ton on what that actually looks like, but yeah, pretty rowdy vulnerability. It's in the Windows common log file system. And I think Eric, you mentioned there have been a whole bunch of those over the last few
Oh
years.
yeah, since like the last, I think is it 5 years? Yeah, since 2018. Like 32 vulnerabilities have been like 32 privilege escalation vulnerabilities. Not even like you know what I mean? Not even like
Yeah.
some small thing. Yeah. A lot of vulnerabilities have been found and patched up in that. And yeah, you were saying, I think when I told you that number, you were like, oh, so this is CLFS infinity, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like this is way farther than Print Nightmare. I think we're on like Print Nightmare 7 or something at this point, and 35. Yeah, it's got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always tough for those systems too, because it's just some very deep design flaw in how the thing was originally built, and they just keep trying to stack things on top of it to make it better. Things
Yeah,
like
I
that.
mean, an interesting thing that Microsoft does, I mean, a lot of people do, right? But something that keeps biting Microsoft, in my opinion, is the fact that, they'll release these things and they'll just try to keep them clouded in obscurity and think that that's going to work for a while. You know what I mean? Just like,
Yep.
yeah, we have this common log file system thing. Just use our APIs. Don't mess with the base log file thing. Don't mess with any of the file system. Just use the APIs that we've given you to work with these, and the rest is magic. Ignore the rest, and it'll be fine. And I mean, we've heard many times. I think out there, anyone in security's heard like security through obscurity, right? It's not security, and and it's just one of those things that over time people reverse engineer things. They figure it out. They realize how this stuff kind of works, and in this particular case, it works in a very strange way that obviously is, I mean, immediate red flags as soon as you look into how the CLFS works. And so it's not surprising that there's been many vulnerabilities discovered in this particular area.
Yeah, yeah. I know we were talking a little bit, and we don't go too deep in the weeds on this, but has a lot of deep hooks into things, and a lot of potential there for abuse. And I do love I do love the hey, just use the API analogy there, because it's like that's been a strategy for a while, is just to
Yeah.
use an API. But a lot of times, I mean, I know you guys know this, those expose quite a bit about how something works, just kind of even by what it gives you back.
Mhm.
And oftentimes those are not coded well, uh, developer type options getting left on, things like that expose. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there's debugging symbols and stuff
Hmm.
available to help reverse engineer the process too. So it's not like no one should believe that it's not going to be reversible. And even if there wasn't debugging symbols, I mean, look at like all the NT direct calls. Microsoft's like, no, 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 don't use those. Use the other API calls. And people are like, yeah, but when we're writing our malware, we want to just go straight to NT calls,
Yeah.
NTDLL calls and stuff, so our kernel calls. So it's funny that this is just the kind of the way things go. But you're right, you see it everywhere. And you see this mindset of kind of just like, no, they'll just use it the way we told them to, right? But I just feel like Microsoft needs to stop doing that. Maybe they're big
Yeah.
enough at this point. I know they're small independent developers, but like maybe it's time to not take that approach. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, just a startup. They're just a startup. I mean, you can't expect
Yeah.
them to be too really good at this stuff just yet.
Hmm. Yeah.
Man, yeah. Um, yeah, but in general, I mean, get that one patched. It's part of a bigger rollout of 97 patches, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those later, potentially if we've got time. But Patch Tuesday was kind of a doozy this month. A lot of those out there. There were so many other concerning vulnerabilities in there. That was just the one that kind of rose to the top.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like we mentioned there, it allows escalation up to the system level. We talk about this a lot in instant response engagements. It's if we see something running in a system, some malware or something like that, then you got to understand it is exactly what it sounds like. It's got pretty much full control of anything it wants to do. There's no
Hmm.
real restrictions there, and we often do see that, right? We'll see command and control beacons, that kind of thing, running as system, so they've got full access to things. So
Yeah.
definitely something to be aware of there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, as an attacker, that's the goal on each machine or anything that you're trying to get access to is to escalate in that way to that at some point. And I mean, once you are that, like you said, you can do anything to that machine and act as that machine's account if that actually matters. I mean, in a lot of cases, it doesn't matter, but in like the domain controller or something like that, domain controller's machine account has permissions to do replication, stuff like that. And so it gets abused in that way too. So yeah.
And I've seen some folks do some funny things with machine accounts in AD, as well, as far as just group memberships and things like that as well. I don't think I've seen that in a long time. They may have even taken that ability out. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it in a long time, but have you guys ran into that or have seen that where you've got like a machine added to the domain admins or some weird thing like that?
Yeah, I've seen some strange things that administrators have done, and I don't really understand, but I've seen things like that for sure. I've seen, I mean, you name it, I've seen it. I think when it comes to permissions and things being members of groups, and like the everyone group being a member of some other group that is like, why did you do that? Why would you do that? That has permission to like write to the domain admins group or something, like it's just the
Yeah.
strangest things.
Yeah, some like nested groups and things like that where it's like, oh no, this is only this, and but it's a member of these three other groups, and
Yeah.
yeah, some crazy stuff out there.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I've definitely seen weird things too, where I think that just people who are originally setting up, I don't generally think it's the people that we're interacting with, but they just didn't know. They didn't know how to audit that. And they don't know when it happened. But someone early on will have done something like created a server admins group, right? Or
hmm
desktop admins group or something like that. And then added all of the desktops into it because they didn't understand how that worked. And so now every desktop, if you just can work from the desktop's account, like you have access, right? So it's
yeah,
um you have local admin over, like the machine itself has local admin over other machines. It ends up being very strange. So yeah.
yeah. I mean, a lot of that's got to, so we see it all the time. You got to make something work. That seemed to fix the thing that the problem they were having, and Active Directory, like, I mean, to look at it at its face is fairly simple the way it works and the way you organize it and that kind of thing. But then when you start layering on things like that, it gets really complicated really fast. And I think a lot of people aren't quite ready for that when they start adding things in and they don't understand those
Yeah.
relationships and whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
so we have in the chat there, yeah, like whitelisting all PowerShell scripts. Uh, yeah, don't do that. Don't just give a blanket PS1 or whatever
What do you mean, man?
approval in your environment.
The admins need to run PowerShell scripts. Okay. It's just allow them all. It's fine. It's going to
Yeah,
be fine.
yeah, no, please don't. Yeah, that's PowerShell is to be kind of goofy, very powerful. It can do pretty much anything. So think about it like that. You really want to
Mhm.
have a scripted ability to do whatever. Nope.
Yeah.
Um,
A couple last things though to wrap this one up. I just
yeah.
say like this group, the Nokiawa kind of ransomware group, apparently has used 5 different CLFS exploits over the time of kind of doing this stuff, and it affects all supported Windows servers and clients currently supported, right? So I don't know if we mentioned that, but just again, it was just patched this last patch Tuesday, so should be
Yeah.
good on that.
Yeah, it's everything, and them using the same sort of vulnerabilities over and over again. I mean, we do see that pretty often with groups, right? They kind of fall into a pattern of, oh, this is the thing we exploit, or this is the general grouping of things we exploit, and
Yeah.
it helps a lot with attribution, for government folks and things like that as well. Usually in a ransomware attack, you find out pretty quickly who who's doing it. Sometimes they're a little bit obscure about it, but a lot of them really like to leave behind something that lets you know it's them.
Mm-hmm.
But
Definitely.
yeah, just
That's
get
like when
that.
I used to hack websites, right? You put a picture of yourself on the front page, right?
Sure, yeah, you put a picture of
When you're a
yourself,
kid. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, your address, because you want to make sure you get credit for that. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you want to, yeah, you want to be like, that's that guy. Oh yeah.
I never did that, but I did read a story once and met a person who did do that. And I was like,
Oh, no
that's
kidding. I thought
interesting.
you were,
Yeah,
they
they
actually put a picture of
legitimately did.
themselves.
They actually legitimately, this was back in like the 90s, I think, but they hacked like a state government site, put a picture of themselves on it and got caught. And I think it's a felon now because of it. An interesting way to go,
Yeah, it's wouldn't be my preference. Wouldn't be my choice of a
No.
tag to let them know it was me. But
But when you're young,
hey,
you're young. The 90s
yeah.
were Wild West, man.
It's funny as
Um,
you were saying that. I was thinking, yeah, the late '90s on the internet was absolutely the Wild West. That was the same phrase that came to mind.
yeah.
Do a lot of fun stuff.
Oh man. Speaking of Wild West, man, supply chain attacks feels like the Wild West these days, right? Like I swear to God, it's like you're hearing the term more and more. There's more and more people that are definitely be targeted on that side of things. And we saw in the last I mean, honestly, was it the last week or so, right? Or within the last month, the 3CX supply chain attack.
Yep.
Um, I think the news first broke actually in the end of March. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that was 3CX, telecom, software, whatever. vulnerable, or it was multiple versions of its client on Windows and Mac OS were infected with a Trojan, kind of the first stage of a Trojan. It's a multi-stage attack, it looks like. And they started seeing it in a bunch of different places. People were reporting this. And 3CX said, hey, that's false positive, guys.
Yeah, I mean, well, they did upload the files to VirusTotal, and it told them they were
Yeah.
clean. So
So
false
it was
positive, move
false
on with your day.
positive. Yeah.
Now, can anyone in the class tell us why that's a bad idea?
God forbid it be something newly seen, right? Like a signed 3CX installer. But yeah, so that's what happened there. They came out and they were like, this is a false positive because we ran it through VirusTotal and didn't get any hits. And then obviously they kept getting reports, and they started working with, I think, Mandiant to track it down and figure some stuff out. But yeah, 3CX has, I believe the numbers were 600,000 customers and like 12 million users across the world. I don't know how many actual incidents there's been based on it, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if they used to be named something else or whatever. Because I did used to work for a consulting company that did a lot of telecom stuff. To be fair, they were primarily Cisco, so it's probably why I didn't encounter them a whole lot. But they just weren't on any of the big ones that we ran into to have that big of a user base. Probably more international too, as well, because I know this was, called out a number of countries where they saw the activity from the Trojan. But yeah, that's a big hit. I mean, that's a lot of systems out there. So kind of curious to see if folks update and get rid of the bad version and also threat hunt afterwards to see if anything was left behind.
Yeah.
Feels like one of those we're going to hear about for a while. Like, oh, we got ransomed, and trace it back and find out it was originally from this 3CX system.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we'll say is that at least it seems like this, they're saying, is a North Korean state-sponsored actor, which is interesting. And so I'm not sure kind of what the goals will have been for that and how it'll end up, but yeah, I do know that they have like cloud hosted environments as well. They said they were going to automatically patch those for people and update those, so people that were using that hopefully weren't vulnerable for too long. But yeah.
I mean, speaking of that, one thing that I thought was really interesting in the article we were reading was it looked like the issue was within the client, right? So it was the desktop client. But yeah, they were talking about updating servers. So was there something else that they didn't really disclose, or are they just kind of doing that so that it works with the new version of the client? I wasn't really sure how to take that by the way they had written it there.
Yeah, now that I think about that, I'm not really sure either. I mean, I've seen some mixed information. The fact of the matter is, I don't think it's super clear, and they haven't disclosed yet how it happened either, right? Like what part of the chain kind of was interrupted. Like, was it during the development process? Was it something else? Was it a dependency, etc. But yeah, I did see that they were patching those, but at the same time, there was a lot of client stuff. I mean, I saw that it was like an installer too, specifically. So
yeah,
and then it was using, I think what it was doing is it was using the installer to set this up. Then it was doing DLL side loading, at least on Windows. And so maybe that was happening on some of these servers. They had got it set up that way.
could have been. Yeah. I did see that side loading was involved. We see that a lot. I mean, a lot of malware uses that technique. It's pretty effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting just to read through that. Yeah, I thought that was a neat, not a neat, but kind of a tough point as well. That yeah, they're not sure if it was just like their internal code repos or whatever had been compromised, or if it was a dependency from further up the chain. You think something like Log4j, things like that we've talked about in the past. It could be an issue. So it'll be a good one to follow and see what comes out of it. See what or if they admit to what actually happened.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting thing about this one. I mean, they talked about specifically kind of how it got its like second stage or third stage, or one of the stages, in the thing. And they were saying that it was going to GitHub pulling icon file, like .ico files that had base64 data appended to them, then ripping that out and building the chain and doing it. And I mean, nothing new, right? Like a little bit of steganography loaded in and pulling data. I mean, I used to do that with some of the stuff too on our like Cobalt Strike beacons and stuff, but it's just kind of funny, I guess, like you hear about all these different ways that people are trying to pull data. And sometimes I start to wonder, like, does it matter? I mean, pulling it from an icon file versus just pulling it from various other places that have digital data, or I mean, sorry, binary data.
It is kind of fun to find one that's using some steganography though, because in general we only see that like in capture the flag scenarios. I mean, as
Sure.
far as on a day to day, we don't get to play with it a whole lot. I know, like I think it was ICE was using that as well. They were pulling down from like a PNG file and doing some fun stuff. So
Hmm.
always like we say, like I think we were talking about the last time you and I did one of these alone. It's like, hey, attackers, give us something fun to play with. At least stop using the same old things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah. In our pen tests, I mean, I haven't now in a couple years, few years maybe, but used to one of our profiles would kind of imitate like jQuery loading and stuff like that, like the library loading. And one of the things we would do is just have the jQuery logo had the payload inside of it. You know what I mean? And it would
nice.
just pull the logo, rip it out, and do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and well, and to kind of circle back on what I was saying too about submitting to virus total, I do want to say nothing wrong with submitting to virus total. It's a good idea. It should be a good first step.
mm-hmm.
And the reason it should be a good first step is, if you've paid attention to us at all, I think we've probably said this 50 times, but the way that checks things is based on hash. So it's a hash value. If any code gets added to that hash, or any code gets added to that application, that hash is completely different. So VirusTotal is going to see it as, no, we don't know that this hash is bad. Nothing detects it. It's good. And so a lot of times with modern malware and particularly with command and control beacons, they're pretty much always going to contain an IP address or something that's unique to you or unique to that attack. So those will almost always show up as clean on something like VirusTotal.
Well,
You've really
on
got to.
virus total though, if it's a fresh hash like never been seen, it will run the actual analysis on it though
That's a
too,
good
right?
point. Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And for that matter, you can force recheck the analysis even if it is the same hash, which is generally what the issue is. Sometimes you have the same hash and it doesn't recheck things based off of maybe previous. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
but nonetheless, it's still like you can't expect something to necessarily determine something, especially when you have multiple stages. So it's just a stager that's been built into this, and that stager may look very inconspicuous and kind of benign. So yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was the one that we were looking at a month or so ago. You and I and Oscar were looking at, and it looked like it was sort of that same type of thing. It was just a very small file, very likely just sort of the initial stager, and yeah. So some of that stuff may not look too bad. Reaches out to an IP. That IP is not known to be bad. It's going to miss those flags, that kind of thing. So
Well, there's a
um,
certain there's something to be said by something that's signed by a known company. I mean, it gets yeah.
exactly, yeah. That too. A lot of those will just say, "Hey, this is signed by a legit vendor. We're good." And that's generally okay, except in these types of scenarios. Things like Stuxnet back in the day, right? It took advantage of a stolen certificate to bypass some of that stuff. So it does happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. I think NVIDIA had some issues with this not too long ago as well. Some stolen certificates and that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
yeah, there are a bunch of good resources out there too, though. VirusTotal doesn't kick out quite as good of a report as things like there's hybrid analysis is one that'll kick you out a report and tell you all the things it's doing. So you can kind of look at it and say, oh, it shouldn't be, it's reaching out to this AWS IP, but that's not who this company normally reaches out to. Things like that. Just something to be careful with all those things too, with using VirusTotal and hybrid, right? Is be very sure that what you're putting in doesn't contain any kind of um, internal information, right? So, and you can't always know that with malware. So be careful with that kind of stuff because once those reports are out there, they're out there
Yeah.
until somebody like the NSA takes one down. But that's a story for another day.
It's always interesting sometimes finding the when someone submits something somewhere and then being able to use that against them. So that is
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Attackers would never do that. So,
I mean,
but yeah,
speaking
this
of
one,
you know,
yeah,
thinking you might not have data that's going out there, but then it does.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's a really good segue there, Eric. I
Yeah,
appreciate that
thanks.
one.
I'm really good at
Uh,
that.
I know I've noticed it's really good. Yeah, so our next one is about our friends at the Yum Brands, and so the Yum Brands, that's KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, Long John Silver's, I believe, all those,
Yeah.
several other ones, right, are out there. Um, they had a ransomware attack back in January.
Yeah.
mid January, January 13th. The company came out and said that although some data was stolen, there was no evidence that the attackers had exfiltrated any customer information or anything personal or anything like that. So
Yeah.
you're good. We're good, right?
We're good.
Everybody's okay.
No, no evidence that it happened, so no worries.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
we're fine. And
Yeah.
then
No evidence of
and then
exfil.
and then they just came out just very recently and said, actually, well, I mean, they didn't even I don't think made a public statement. They just started sending messages to people being like,
Yep.
hey, so your data was stolen. As people do. And so, I mean, it's not a new breach. It's not necessarily something new to cover, but it is an interesting thing. I mean, it's just that we've talked about this before, right? When it comes down to it from an investigation point of view, it's very easy to find no evidence of the thing you don't want to find evidence of.
Yeah.
Um, and as someone who's an incident responder, Pink, I mean, what's kind of your take on some of that?
It's trash. Drives me nuts, man. This kills me. I see this every time I read one of these breach reports and it says there's no evidence of data exfiltration. I just kind of chuckle because it's like, yeah, I'm sure there's not. I'm sure, even if you've got folks looking for it, it's often difficult to find. Um, but beyond that, it's a very lawyer shenanigan term that we see a lot. And
Mhm.
of course, if there's not evidence of exfiltration, you don't want to come out in your report and say, "Yeah, data was probably stolen." I get that,
Yeah,
but it gives people a real false sense of security with that kind of stuff. It's
it
just
really
like,
does.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I don't. Is there a better way to do it? I don't know, right? Because at the end of the day, you're
yeah,
definitely not going to come out and be like, it probably was. We don't know, right? Or there's a high chance that it happened, but we're not aware. I mean, that makes it sound way worse, and you might be scaring people for no reason, and you're probably putting yourself in legal, issues and ruining your brand further, and I mean all kinds of things, right? So it's not a better way to do it. I wouldn't recommend anyone who goes out there and just like, who knows?
yeah. Maybe something happened. I get it. Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with that, and that's why in these situations you do always want to have your legal team involved and that kind of thing. I think at least for internal incident response reports and things like that you're going to write, you need to make sure that you are calling that out. Hey, we were compromised by this group. They are known to exfiltrate data and take data, so we need to be aware of this and keep our eyes peeled for it. For the good of our clients, the good of our customers, whoever that may be, the good of our employees, which I think is important on this. I see you chuckling there. I think you're reading chat. Is that what happened?
Yeah. The hackers out Pizza the Hut. It just got
Yeah,
me a little bit. I had
they,
to chuckle.
they did out Pizza the Hut. Pretty great. Yeah. Um, but yeah, um, it is interesting, and in this one they do kind of talk about really probably what was taken was employee information, right? HR information, that kind of thing. I think that's likely who they're sending these notifications out to, just the way this reads. So probably not customer information. I mean, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Eric, but I've been to KFC many times in my life. I enjoy fried chicken, and I've never been carded when trying to buy a bucket, so I don't think they've ever asked me for
Yeah.
ID.
I don't know because I also enjoy fried chicken, so I've never been to KFC.
No, I mean that's a valid point, and I mean,
No, I'm just playing. But
no,
it is not my favorite place to go. That said, I've been to many Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and various
yeah,
other places. No, I haven't been carded. I think the worst that's been happening is they ask me for my name for when my order's up, and I tell them that I'm Bob. Um, yeah, but no, I mean I don't know what that data looks like, right? And what
yeah,
we're talking about, and I'm sure that there's people with, I mean, like these days, this is new to me. I'm too old, I guess, but like there's apps for like every restaurant to go and order your food ahead of time and do your thing and then just
it's
come
true.
pick it up and get discounts when you order through the app, which like the idea of walking into a Taco Bell, but having ordered my food on my phone in the car is still kind of weird to me. I'd rather just walk up and say what I want and pay for it. But again, I'm old now. So, but I'm sure there's a decent amount of data that's stored about customers and stuff like that through other means these days, not to
Oh,
mention who knows whatever promotional stuff that they've done, et cetera. So
it's a valid point, and now I just realized that yeah, we do in fact do that at Taco Bell.
there you
Taco Bell
go.
in particular. Yeah, so there we go. It's probably got some lost information out there.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I
I
can
tend
see why at Taco Bell specifically, you got to know if they're going to have the Mexican pizza or not.
every time. Yeah,
Yeah.
every
You don't want
time.
to walk. You don't want to go all the way there and then be like, I couldn't get my Mexican pizza.
Yeah, and I don't want to explain like if I'm getting a power bowl or something like that. It's difficult to be like no beans, extra rice, add onions. It's just I can just tap and click and do all that stuff and get my food
There you go.
mostly correct. Mostly, occasionally it's correct. Uh, but I do think though we might
Non-zero
have
amount of correct.
yeah, non-zero amount of correct. Yeah, exactly. I do think we might have glazed over an important part here, though, is because this is KFC. I wonder if they were storing the secret recipe and that got
Mm.
stolen. Maybe there's going to be a clone of
A
not good chicken.
copycat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Because I do
Tennessee
agree.
fried chicken or
Yeah,
something.
Tennessee Fried Chicken. Yeah, exactly. I do agree that I'm not a big KFC fan. I used to like it a lot better back in the day. I think it was better, but extra crispy all the way too. But
Right.
definitely better chicken restaurants, and because we don't, I mean, you say we don't have a ton else here, so I'm going to give you guys a little background on KFC. Um, Being a man from these areas, got a little history on that, right? So, you had Colonel Sanders, but he had a guy that worked with him, whose name I can't remember right now, who also went off to start a chicken restaurant in the same area called Lee's Famous Recipe. And I don't know how far those have spread. I know they're out as far as like Missouri, but I'm not sure beyond that. Lee's Famous Recipe chicken is by far the better of those two. It is excellent chicken, but their sides aren't as good. So if you could really combine the two,
Sure.
and you'd have a really
Like
perfect
a
restaurant.
like a combination Taco Bell Pizza Hut or something like that. But you
Yeah,
need a combination Lee's and KFC.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need the combo of those, but
Yeah.
that would never happen.
Well,
It's kind of an old rivalry there. Down in London, Kentucky, they have every year the World Chicken Festival, which is to celebrate the two chicken restaurants that were birthed out of that area. Have the world's largest skillet, I believe. They cook some chicken. Don't eat that chicken; you will probably die of salmonella because it is almost always undercooked. So just some tips there, some things to know. Um,
well, there
but
we go. Apparently, they've already leaked it. There's a link
ah,
in chat.
there you go. It
I'm
turns
sure
out it
the
was
link
just
is not phishing. Sure, you won't get breached if you click it. I wish there was an well, like I don't mind that Cliff posted that, but I mean, I do now that I just think about that out loud. I'm like, I wish there was an option like everybody can chat with everybody, but no links. Because
yeah, but no
honestly,
links.
probably not the best. Like, use your own common sense when clicking links in chats where anyone can be there. But yes, I do need to know, Michael, how the KFC in Japan is amazing. What about it specifically? What's different? I need to have some deets on this. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, is it even crispier? Do they have like an extra crispy? Oh, it is
mm,
actually crispy. That is important. That's why I always go for the extra crispy because
yeah.
sometimes it's soggy. Nobody wants soggy chicken.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I feel like we beat that one to death a bit. We don't have a lot more to go over, and our timing is fast. We could just BS with you guys more. The last kind of thing we're going to talk about is just some quick hits and some patches. Maybe we'll just end early. I don't know how we'll do this. We'll hang out and chat with you guys about your favorite chicken. But there's a lot of patches recently. Obviously, Microsoft's Patch Tuesday had. You were saying 97. I think there was like more. I think it was 97 with critical importance. There's actually some more beyond that. It's like 100 and
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Nonetheless, there's like 7 criticals, 90 importance. It's a doozy of the patches. Pinky said earlier. There's not only the one that is the CLFS. Is that right? CLFS? Yeah. But there's also some ones that affect Office Word Publisher and stuff that can allow a remote code execution by just opening a document. So they're not actively being exploited, but just definitely something concerning, especially once people dissect those patches, they're going to probably find a way to start sending those out and phishing, right? So make sure you're on top of those things. Additionally, Apple had some major patches to their iOS devices. They had a patch that came out originally for a lot of the new stuff, a lot of the in support stuff and things like that to fix those things. But then they also did an emergency patch where they backported that to older devices because of the significance of them. Abilities to do execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges through one by doing kind of a maliciously crafted app, and then the other one I believe is doing it, like malicious web pages could get execution of malicious code as well. So a lot of malicious in what I just said.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, use that word a lot. Yeah.
Malicious is delicious. Um, so that's the Apple stuff. If you're using those devices, take care of those. And then, they're not vulnerable to PC viruses, but they are vulnerable to their own. So be careful. Adobe did some updates to a bunch of different stuff, digital editions in Copy, Acrobat, and Reader, Substance 3D Stager, Dimensions, Substance 3D Designer. Lots of criticals and important vulns, lots of code execution stuff. I guess especially like Acrobat and Reader and stuff, right? Those are things that people use a decent amount, so make sure that those are up to date. Cisco had a bunch of devices with some high severity vulns that could lead to full compromise of devices. Not going to go through all those.
There were 5 denial of service vulnerabilities in that list, by the way, and I'm sure these will come out with the links with the thing. But yeah, I was just, as I was making notes, I was just like another DOS and another DOS. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes, I mean, depending, I didn't look super deep on the Cisco ones, but sometimes when you have DOSs, they're just like code execution around the corner, depending on what's going on. Like if it's some kind of overflow or something, right? It could potentially go somewhere else, but they just go, hey, in the very least, it's a DOS. SAP, diagnosis agents, business objects, business intelligence platform, and the NetWeaver had some like an 8.7 and 9.0, 9.8 critical vulnerabilities that kind of came out. So want to definitely take care of those if
they
you
were
have them.
Particularly around credential theft too. So it allowed a certain file to be decrypted and could take those credentials and do more evil with them, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and then
also one allowed execution of scripts and could take over like the agent systems. But then there was the other one that was definitely about, it was just basic privileges. You could pull a file, decrypt it, and get passwords and stuff, and do account compromise. So yeah.
Yeah. And I did get distracted by chat because we're talking about Lee's chicken over here now, and now I'm hungry. I've not been able to eat it in years, but now I'm just hungry. But the iPhone and the Mac OS one, I did want to point out that, so I think probably the link that went out with this was one about the government kind of saying, hey, here's I think it's May 1st, it's sort of the drop dead date to get all these things patched. I just kind of wanted to give them a little love for that because, they've not historically been great at that kind of stuff. So I'm really glad to see that they're putting some directives out there to say, hey, get this stuff patched by this date. To be fair, I think the one they're talking about has been out since November, so still a little bit slower than I'd like, but at least moving in the right direction. So hopefully that kind of continues. And yeah, I did notice too here in the chat, Cliff had thrown us a link in to one of our articles. I thought we had covered this one, but we may not have, as I was kind of thinking back through the last show. There was a critical vulnerability for Microsoft Outlook, and it involved being able to essentially point a sound file, a custom sound file, in an email back to like a UNC path, so a file sharing path, / whatever, and then steal credentials that way. And so I actually did want to talk to you about this one, Eric, because I don't think we got to chat about it. Is it just me? That's a pretty old method of stealing credentials, right? Pointing back to a share that exists in your attacker environment, kind of thing, and because it automatically passes that authentication across.
I mean, it dated in the sense that it's been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yes, still extremely actively used, and a lot. I mean, Print Nightmare was highly using that when it first came out, and things like that. So. Wait, is it Print Nightmare that was using that? No, it was sorry, Log4j was using that a bunch at first when it first came out. When they were getting those paths, they were using those paths to like redirect to things. There's a bunch of different things that were doing that. I mean, it's one of those go-tos, like, can I get it to reference this path and try to pass a authentication hash to me or some kind of handshake to me?
Yeah, you think about how when you click on one of those paths, right? Like, if you have permissions to access it, just think about it on your local network. It's passing authentication information across to say, hey, I do have permission, or to authorize you to see that.
Yeah.
So when
if
you
it's
click
like an
that,
SMB type of communication, it doesn't matter if it's going external or not. Yep.
Yep, it's always going to send that. So yeah, I can see where that's really effective. And I remember reading this one, I was like, well, that's not anything particularly new. What was new about this one was the being able to specify a custom sound. I still don't quite understand why this is a function. Like, what? Why do I
I
need
don't
to
know why a
specify?
lot of things are functions, man. Okay,
Yeah.
in this day and age, everybody wants everything to be as fancy as possible. I need to have music in my email messages. I need to have like the John Cena, coming out when you read my email. You know what I mean?
I don't even think it was just reading the email though. It was just like upon delivery. So now though, what I
Even
want to
better.
do is, yeah, exactly. I
Dun,
want to
dun,
have
dun,
the John.
dun, when
Yeah,
my emails come in. You know what I mean?
every
Yeah.
time. Yeah, every
Yeah.
time. I really want to do that. So yeah, Cliff points out it is legacy code in Outlook. But again, why was it
Yeah.
ever there to begin with? I I
For the
think it's going
exact
to be.
reason I just said.
Yeah, I guess so, man. I do kind of love it. I wish I would have known that that functionality was there to do exactly that. Every time you get an email from me, it just plays that or some other fun thing. So
Yeah. But yeah, it is still commonly used quite a bit. I mean, that's why, one of the reasons if you can just block egress of that kind of stuff in general, you know what I mean?
yep,
Because probably no reason that trying traffic needs to leave your network. And definitely one of those things that anytime you can exploit something, if you like, even to this day, for instance, if I get it's very, very common that Microsoft databases that are still configured to have like, what is it, XP file exists, dir tree, things like that. And it's just like, you just reference them to your thing, capture a hash, relay it to somewhere else in the network and take advantage of it. If there's permissions to do so, right? Like if the
yeah,
account that's running under has the permissions to do that, or that machine does. But nonetheless, it's one of the first things to check. It's old but good.
yeah. And I mean, it does kind of go back to just things we've talked about in the past too. With just as a good security practice, you should be sort of default deny even on egress traffic, right? You don't, but in particular, you don't want to be passing SMB outside of your environment. I can't think of a single valid use case for why you would want to do that, and there's not a better way to handle that. So turn that off. Don't allow port 445 to leave your network. Keep that all internal. Don't allow that on your egress firewalls to prevent that kind of thing. And so yeah, this one was weird for me in a bunch of reasons, right? Both the sound file, kind of using an older method that has been around for a long time. That that just wasn't a new thing. But that's, as we've said before, if something works, you keep doing it. And then also too, just that a lot of folks aren't blocking 445 outbound. It just seems like that would be one of the first things I would want to do.
Yeah.
Um,
It's still a
but
problem inbound if someone's already in your network, but at least
yeah,
handle the outbound. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Don't make it that the initial point of ingress for an attacker. So I noticed Megan was asking like custom ringtones. Yes, but as I understand it, is a custom ringtone that you as the sender get to specify, which
sounds
again
awesome.
sounds awesome, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good.
I
Their
might
entire
spend the rest of my day figuring that out. Just different ways of doing that in any part of life. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna laugh because what's gonna happen on our Monday morning all company meeting is everybody's gonna hear in the background all of the John Cena's going off for people specifying that and sending it to each other. That's what's gonna happen now.
I don't
We,
imagine it actually is. I don't know. You know what? We're just going to move on from that. There was
yeah,
also
yeah,
FortiNet stuff, which there was some patches in that FortiPresence, FortiWeb 8.0 on FortiWeb and a 9.3 in FortiPresence. So patch those up if you have those. And I guess I don't know why I'm trying to speed us up. We're done. We're out of time. What do you guys want to talk about?
yeah. I mean, I see
Just
here
wait
something
until
about
smells can be produced. KFC ad will
yeah.
arrive with a smell of chicken. I hope that never happens. Did we talk about this on one of our Hackle boxes, or we were
Not
talking about
sure.
this. I was part of a conversation around this not that long ago, like in the last couple months. And please let that never ever happen.
Yeah.
Never want to have smells associated with advertisements ever in my life, please.
Now I'm trying to think
Just
about
think
how to
of
make
how
that
bad
work.
that could go. Just think of how bad that could
Oh,
go.
it could go terribly, terribly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like just
absolutely.
think about what you're going to smell if you watch a Febreze commercial.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's gonna be rough.
Yeah.
But it would add to the experience, right? I mean, it would be, if you could implement it for movies, let's go back to the 80s or, 90s with smell-o-vision, always being a kind of joke on cartoons and that kind of
Mhm.
thing. Um, might be a fun immersive experience. I know I've been on those rides at like, Disney World and stuff where you go in and they're shooting smells at you and things like that. It's kind of fun. Yeah. Don't know that I
Cliff said
want it
they
for every ad.
embed a URL in the header that sends the password when the trigger for message arrives. Sound processes the message. When the trigger for message arrives, sound processes the message.
Okay. So the yeah,
I think the thing
the
is
ding, the
and
ding,
I
yeah.
literally didn't dig into this one, but is it for a custom sound or not? Because so we know that it's sending the password, it's doing a request, right? So they're putting in an address, and the address can be a remote thing, and it can go over, SMB. And so it goes out, reaches out to that share essentially that's specified, and then it's just gonna hand off credentials. And look, I have not dug into this one. I really should have already, but I haven't. But that said, I don't know the exact reason. Like, what's the actual purpose of the header if it wasn't being exploited?
Right, yeah. And as Cliff makes the point there, one thing about this was you don't even have to read the email because of
Mhm.
it's hitting that arrival sound, is one
Yeah.
of the advantages to using that. But yeah, why does it exist to begin with is kind of the thing. Um, yeah, and I had dug into this one a whole bunch last month when we first started looking at it, but I've since forgotten everything I know, basically. I'm sure I've got notes
I
on
do
it
that
where I went a little
daily.
deeper. Yeah, yep. Did see that sounds like smelt fishing is in full swing in Duluth, so good for you guys. I don't know anything about smelt fishing. We don't have those down here, as far as I know.
All right. I think we're rambling. I think this thing is just going to get cut a little bit short. Thank you everybody for participating in chat. Honestly, it's one of those things that makes doing this a lot more relaxed and a
Yeah,
lot more chill, especially when you're not feeling well for the day. Um, I don't know if we talked about anything useful, but hopefully we did. And hopefully Oscar comes back next week, and or not next week, but next month. Well, hopefully he's
so we have
back
an
next
adult.
week as well. So we have an adult. We actually have someone who, keeps us on track and lets us not talk about chicken for an hour. Um,
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. If he was on here, we'd still be talking about chicken, and we would have not made it to the next segment.
that's fair.
So,
That's fair.
it is what it is. But
All right.
yeah, appreciate it, everybody. Have a good weekend,
Yep. Bye.
everybody.